It is Trope Talk Thursday, and today's trope, we're talking about mimics. Pretty sure most of you guys at home are already pretty familiar with the whole concept of a mimic. Recently, they've become a lot more prominent in horror media, especially on the internet, with the addition of the brand new subgenre known as analog horror. I guess I would make horror kind of a super genre. Not really sure how that works. For those of you at home who are not entirely familiar, I have the definition here from Wikipedia. Commonly characterized by low fidelity graphics, cryptic messages, little to no traditional jump scares, and visual styles reminiscent of the late 20th century television and analog recordings. Thanks, Wikipedia. The idea of imitation itself isn't entirely a unique concept, obviously. I mean, look at nature, folklore, mythology. In the context of horror, however, to talk about mimics, we first have to talk about the Uncanny Valley. The Uncanny Valley effect is often felt when something seems natural or human, but something just doesn't seem quite right. It could be something so subtle that it's difficult to pinpoint exactly what the sensation is coming from. I'm gonna flash a couple images with robots and the people that they're kind of made to imitate. And I want you to quickly guess which one's the robot and which one's the human. And after we're done, we're gonna kind of compare it. Okay, here is the first one, the next one, and boom, okay. Here are the results. And now that you have like a second to look at them, it seems obvious now. There's some primal part of your brain, an alarm that is going off, tell you that that thing's not human. In nature, it's oftentimes to protect the creature, you know, imitating maybe a more poisonous or dangerous in general species, so predators don't predate on it. Sometimes it's also used to catch prey. In this case, maybe it wants you to hesitate. Maybe for just a second. Maybe a second is all it needs. Now that you have some rough understanding of the ingredients, let's get into the main dish. Mimics are kind of a class of entities in horror that imitate or disguise themselves in a familiar form, usually a person, sometimes an animal, with the intention of deceiving unsuspecting victims. Sometimes they're able to shapeshift, sometimes what you see is what you get. Or I guess what you think you see. No matter which one it is though, the goal is essentially the same: to outsmart you. For a large portion of humanity's history, we spent a lot of time trying to climb that food chain. Our biggest asset being our intelligence, our brain. And the idea that something is intelligent enough to outsmart you, it doesn't really surprise me that it's so deeply ingrained into human instinct. I mean, that's like our best weapon is our brain. And as soon as something is able to circumvent that, to, you know, outsmart us, that can be a big problem. But how do you effectively draw on that fear? Maybe we can study one of the earliest iterations of mimics in analog horror, since that's kind of their main thing. I think I know what you're thinking of. It's a series that really popularized it. We're talking about Gemini Home Entertainment. Isn't there more like a more accurate representation of how mimics are used in horror today?
Well, actually, I'm glad you
What the fuck?
Can't forget. Well, yes, the way mimics are done today is a good bit different than they were in Gemini Home Entertainment. Nowadays, a lot of analog horror creators focus on getting kind of a scare out of people using a spooky face. And it, you know, I've complained about it before. It lacks a lot of subtlety, it lacks a lot of, you know, finesse. And I think that Gemini is a great example of how, you know, we could steer it maybe into a better direction.
Sorry about that. I just think that Gemini is a really good example of what we could kind of shift back to in order to make mimics more interesting. The way that the mimics are now, they don't really tell much of a story on their own. And I think if we kind of shift it in a different direction into the way that Gemini was doing, I think we can utilize them, still have them be creepy Maybe they won't have the same kind of jump scare effect. I think that it could still be effective as long as we, do it right. Here is some examples that Gemini Home Entertainment did very well. See how you kind of still get that feeling of discomfort? You don't even see any facial features, really. For the most part, there's no facial features. It's just awkward, disjointed movement. You can even kind of work off of the implication of what a mimic really implies. A mimic in its basic form is a predator. It is something that can outsmart you. A mimic can betray you. And there's a certain sense of drama that comes from just the very aspect of it. I feel like in analog horror, there is a potential to draw on a sense of dramatic storytelling. I don't think there are very many interactions between people and people in a lot of these. I mean, look at the movie The Thing.
What do you got in mind, McCready?
A little test. The windows. You and Palmer, tie everybody down real tight.
What for?
For your health.
Come on, let's rush him. He's not gonna blow us all up.
That is a perfect example of how these ideas can clash, how they can create a sense of drama. A mimic can be more than just a reason to show a scary face. If you still want to go the face route, there's definitely ways that you can do it, I'm sure there's some purpose. I have to be wrong, right? There has to be some times when it is good. If you want to do that, my advice to you, make it subtle. Make it subtle. Don't go Mandela catalog. You know what I mean? Think about it like this, okay? What are some details that a non-human entity might lose, might forget? Facial proportions are very important when it comes to that uncanny valley feeling, if you'll notice, a big part is the complexion is often too perfect. That's another thing. Sometimes the lack of flaw can be just as terrifying as flaws. It's a spectrum. You can have it be too perfect with porcelain skin, it's manufactured, and that is terrifying because of the implications of that. And then there's this form is incredibly flawed. That gives it a sense of more of like an organic feeling to it. This is evolution. Evolution created this creature to hunt humans. But yeah, I'm sorry if I rambled on. I hope that some part of this may have been useful. This is just my advice coming from a consumer of the media, I guess now a creator of the media. First episode of Anima Synth, check it out. I'm not a professional. I'm not an expert. Please take everything I say with a grain of salt. Thank you for watching. Take care, okay?